Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's up, Mike?
Rich, how are you? Before we get to the important aspects of this,
yes, sir.
You mentioned Davis Mills, and I just have to comment, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this. There are an inordinate number of quarterbacks in the NFL, especially backups, where you can take their first name and make it their last name, and take their last name and make it their first name, and it sounds the same.
Yep.
There's a bunch of them.
Go for it. You got any more? You got other ones that you like?
Oh, there's plenty of them. I mean, just I was just thinking guys that were drafted. Lawrence Trevor, if we want to do that. Wilson Zach, if we want to do that. But it's usually backups, like Cooper Rush Cooper, same difference.
Yep.
So there's a bunch. The list goes on and on. It's a fun exercise.
Wilson
Maybe
Phillips.
it's like a driving. It's like a driving thing. Instead of spotting license plates, you think of quarterbacks whose names can be interchanged, and it sounds just the same as the name currently is.
Oh man, Pro Football Talks. Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. I literally, I'll say on camera and into this microphone what I texted you earlier, Mike Florio. I didn't understand your post, but the one thing I understand about your post on this subject matter is something important is in there to inform something about the Texans and Deshaun Watson and his immediate future in the NFL. What in the world is going on between his lawyers now that they are publicly talking at one another?
The information that you got before the draft and your instincts were accurate. They were trying to settle the cases. That's why everything got quiet. You have the lawyers at each other's throats with social media posts and statements and press conferences. And 3 weeks ago today, they were in court accusing each side of destroying evidence. And then after that, as the draft approached, it got deathly silent. It continued that way. And what we now know, by virtue of the latest Instagram post from Tony Busby, there was a confidentiality agreement that was written up to allow them to engage in settlement talks. So the two parties agreed, and I assume that this thing was eventually signed. It was a document that he claims that Rusty Hardin, Deshaun Watson's lawyer, put together, allowing settlement conversations to occur under a veil of confidentiality. And that's relevant now because Busby is pointing to that apparently as his rebuttal to the claim from Rusty Hardin that Busby is the one who wants confidentiality and Hardin and Watson don't. But there's a distinction to be made here. It's one thing to want confidentiality as it relates to the settlement discussions. It's another thing to want confidentiality as it relates to the outcome of the settlement, if you reach one. And the thing that Hardin said yesterday that I think was very significant and very telling as to where this currently stands, Watson and Hardin don't want confidentiality of the terms of the settlement. Busby does, according to Hardin, which turns the whole process on its head. Usually the person who writes the check is the one who wants no one to be able to talk about anything.
Right.
Doesn't want others to show up and say, I want mine. Oh, this is a guy who's just writing checks. The defendant wants the silence. When you flip it around, the only plausible inference is Watson's happy to talk about it, which means the amounts involved aren't all that much, and that's out there now. And I haven't seen anything from Busby that effectively rebuts that perception that Hardin has created.
Okay, so one thing that also leapt out at me, and I know it did to you, was in Busby's latest Instagram statement, which is the first time we're hearing from him. He said that we obviously didn't reach out to them. They begged us via the Texans to mediate. We hold the cards. The truth sometimes or most of the time hurts. There's 4 exclamation points there. We approached them, question mark, exclamation point, question mark. My ass is how it ends, end quote. I need to say that so you don't think that that's what I'm saying to you, Mike. So what's up with that?
Well, here's my understanding, and I've actually done some reporting for a change on this. I haven't written it yet because I have one more phone call I need to make.
Okay.
But the Texans were not involved in any of these communications. I believe that there's a lawyer who does work for someone tied to the Texans, possibly owner Cal McNair, who was a liaison, a go-between, and that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon to get somebody who can break the ice, because no one wants to be the one to make the first call in a situation like this, because the first call can be interpreted as a sign of weakness. By virtue of the fact that the two lawyers right now can't agree on who made the first move. If you're the one who's saying, let's talk settlement, you're perceived as the one who really wants to settle the case. That's why this seemingly childish fight is happening. So I believe that the truth here is that there's some lawyer out there with a tie to the Texans by way of some sort of representation relationship who served as that liaison. And it wouldn't surprise me if Busby got that factually wrong, because at one point he claimed it was the Texans quarterbacks coach who had referred Watson to one of his clients when it was Watson's private quarterback coach, which is very different from someone who works directly for the team. So I think that's how that gets resolved. The Texans haven't been involved in this, but it's entirely possible that a lawyer with a relationship with the Texans has worked to bring the two sides together so nobody has to be the one that says, hey, I'd really like to settle this case.
So that's the issue now, is now that this has all been out there where Watson, as you point out in your post, and his side can say, hey, now that it's confidential and we don't know the terms, you knew I wanted you to know the terms of it, and so it's not that much money, so there's nothing to really see here in terms of my reputation being tarnished or what have you. Certainly if that's another way to say to the NFL, don't suspend me for too much. So now that that's been put out there for Watson's side, and Busby can sit here and say, we hold all the cards, we've got everything, going for us. The reason why I'm having you on to go through all of this sort of slinging of mud is to say, is this something that you think, based on your knowledge of the NFL and of course the legal system, is something that can be settled now, leading to Watson elsewhere this summer? Mike Florio.
Yes, Rich, absolutely. And I think what can happen now, and I think the next move in all of this is for Harden, once this dies down, and I think it will, the weekend will help, but once it dies down, Harden and Watson can say, okay, fine, we'll agree to the confidentiality that you have requested. And I don't know whether there are other major stumbling blocks toward a settlement, but my understanding was, before any of this came up, that the one big issue was confidentiality, with this reverse image of what we usually expect, where the defendant wants it and the plaintiff either doesn't want it or doesn't care. Here, the plaintiff's lawyer wants it, the defendant doesn't want it, and it could be that Harden has done enough so that when the cases are settled, folks like us can say, well, maybe it wasn't as much as you would think, because remember, Harden wanted none of it to be confidential. That may be the genius in what Harden did yesterday, to lay the foundation to flip and say, okay, fine, we'll give you confidentiality now, settle the cases, and that perception that Watson wrote six-figure checks to 22 different people just won't be there.
Okay. So then what would be the way to getting Watson to where he wants to go? What happens then? I mean, because to me, like, again, a team that feels that they do their due diligence, if this is something that's settled and we find out that it's untoward behavior, it's unseemly behavior, it's behavior that will definitely stick to Deshaun Watson forevermore, but it doesn't rise to the occasion of criminal, and the NFL handles its business in suspending Watson for a few games. Don't you think a team would absolutely go in the direction of flipping the Texans, the draft capital, that Nick Caserio could say it's now Davis Mills' turn here with Tyrod Taylor? What do you think?
I know it'll happen. The moment these cases are settled, if it happens, that's when the land rush begins for the Deshaun Watson contract. And the Texans still may get a decent return, because even though this litigation took a lot of the steam out of the talk of, and somebody had told me at one point, 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson, ideally if one of them was a top 10 pick this year to make it happen. That subsided when we had 22 lawsuits to contend with. Those go away. If you get 2, 3, 4 teams at the table, then the value gets pumped back into this potential trade. And I know Peter's got the teams that he's put on the short list. I'd put the Dolphins and the Eagles at the top.
Yep.
And the Eagles are one that we've been saying for weeks now you need to keep an eye on. They desperately want a franchise quarterback. And, yes, they want to give Jalen Hurts the chance this year to show that he's the guy. But if they have an opportunity to get a guy who's shown he can do it and have him for 10 years, I think they will aggressively try to make something like that happen. The Dolphins have been very quiet about it, but there's a sense that they're lurking. And, we never have gotten a wish list from Deshaun Watson, but I really think at this point, and I don't know how aggressive he would be with exercising his no-trade clause, and really every starting quarterback has a de facto no-trade clause because you're not going to trade for a guy that doesn't want to be there.
Right.
But Watson may be a lot less picky than he would have been before all this stuff happened because I think he'll just be glad to have a chance to go start up his career anywhere.
Before I let you go, Mike Florio, you were kind enough to post about the Aaron Jones conversation that occurred right here in this space at this very time, actually yesterday on Thursday. And he said, essentially the Adam Schefter draft day report that his teammate Aaron Rodgers didn't want to come back and play for Green Bay or was telling people that he was done there shocked him. Also told stories about how Rodgers was mentoring Jordan Love during practice, helping him out, being there for him, just like every other teammate. And I just was left with the sense of just throwing my hands up saying, I'm no closer to understanding what the hell's going on there. Are you?
Well, I think that really, at the end of the day, there's two different sides to this from Rodgers' perspective. I think he decided last year, after the Packers did what they did, that he was not going to do anything within the building, on the practice field, game day, wherever, to make it look like he was troubled by the arrival of Jordan Love, and that he would funnel all of that anxiety and angst and anger toward a positive season. And it worked. He was the MVP. He was the best player in football. Now, after the season, all bets were off. And I think where it stands now is battle lines are drawn. Packers are calling his bluff. Packers, barring some sort of a change of heart, aren't going to trade him. And I think that when you hear the comments from guys like John Kuhn and James Jones, who are being, I think, whether they understand it or not, whether they realize it or not, they're being used by Rodgers as surrogates to get his message out there. When he talks to them and they talk to media and say the situation is fixable, that's basically Rodgers saying the situation is fixable. And I think he's going to find a way to show up and act like everything's fine. What's everybody looking at? Is there a booger I'm not aware of? And blame us for making a big deal out of something that he'll claim wasn't a big deal, and then he plays this year, and then we do it all again next year.
No way. So then, what is the there? What you're saying? It's Jordan Love, and he was just able to swallow it, every single day, going to practice, acting the good guy, good soldier,
yes.
And that's what you're saying.
Because he knew everybody was watching and waiting for whatever we expected angry Aaron Rodgers to do. So he was Mr. Positivity all year long. I remember Aaron Jones telling me that after their win over the Lions, when Jones had a huge game, over 200 yards from scrimmage and 3 touchdowns, he said that Aaron's been awesome. He hasn't been upset about anything. He's just motivated and focused and determined, and that's apparently how he was all year. Except when he reportedly was telling teammates, hey, you're about to be a free agent. By the way, I'm not going to be here next year. I don't know how that fits into it.
Right.
But hey, look, at the end of the day, Rich, if they say to him, play for us or play for no one, and playing for no one entails paying them back almost $30 million and not continuing one of the greatest quarterbacking careers in league history, is he really going to not play? He doesn't have an issue with his teammates. He doesn't have an issue with the coaching staff. Is he really not going to play and then become public enemy number one in Green Bay? I don't think he's going to do it, and I think it's brilliant by the Packers, his box, and there's really no way out for him other than to play this year.
Who's on PFT PM? What do you got later on today?
Oh, PFT PM's on hiatus.
Oh.
We're on summer break, baby. School's out.
Good.
School's out. So now
that's great.
Beginning my moderate and responsible consumption at 6 p.m., I really can start technically at 9 a.m., but I wait.
It is 5 o'clock somewhere, Mike, as I'm sure you've heard that phrase. All right, great. So have a great weekend. We'll see you on Pro Football Talk Monday morning. We'll see you on that show.
Yes, bright and early.
Okay,
Rich,
man.
Thank you, pal.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, too. That's Mike Florio here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.